Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Dean, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's celebration, which honours the considerable achievements of Dr Margaret Williams-Weir. Dr Williams-Weir is a member of the Malera, Bandjalang People in northern New South Wales. She made history in 1957 when she became the first recorded Aboriginal person to enrol and subsequently graduate from a course at an Australian university. It is my pleasure indeed to be able to host this important event and celebration to help share Margot's exceptional story. It is unfortunate, though, that she's too ill to travel and be here with us today. But I'm really pleased that Melissa Williams, her niece, is here, and Melissa, I'm delighted to welcome you to the graduate school. I'd also like to welcome Margot's close friends, including Robin McLeod and Pat Anderson, who've travelled from interstate to be here. I'm also very pleased to welcome our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Glenn Davis, Pro-Vice-Chancellors Ian Anderson, Richard James, Marap Barak Associate Director Charles O'Leary. I also want to welcome Jack Pearson, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Advisory Board member, along with Melissa. His cousin Noel, a VC's fellow, has sent a late apology because he missed his flight out of Cape York. But Jack, it's a delight to have you here. And I welcome all staff and students who are here as well, and I thank you for joining us for today's celebration. In a few moments, I'll invite Auntie Margaret Gardner to give a welcome to country, and then the Jindi Warrabak dancers will perform a welcome dance. Professor Ian Anderson will then formally respond to the welcome to country, and following this, the Vice-Chancellor and I will make some special announcements, after which we'll invite Margot's niece, Melissa, to speak. And then at the conclusion of the proceedings here, we're all going to wander downstairs and actually formally unveil, christen, name the Dr Margaret Williams-Weir Lounge. And then you can join me for a light lunch. So, Auntie Margaret Gardner, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's very nice to be invited here this morning to be part of a very important event. As you've been advised, the doctor is unwell. She's reaching an age now where we need to start thinking about the ageing population of the Aboriginal community nationally, and particularly here in Victoria, because that's where I'm from, and start to think about how we can honour them. Now, this is the first type of event that's happened at Melbourne University. Margaret, I'll use Margaret because my name's Margaret. It means pearl, by the way, in Greek. And there are some of us who are pearls in the community. And she is one of them. To be the first student at a university in the whole of Australia is really a milestone, and for her to have lived her life sort of paving the way to allow doors to be open to others is also a very important thing. There are still many firsts for Aboriginal people to accomplish in this country, but slowly but surely, being the quiet achievers, we are making ground on that. I think the number of students that attend here is increasing each year, which is a good thing. It shows it's a good institution and is welcoming and able to give people the education and then qualifications that they're looking for, so that they can improve the lives of people in their communities around Australia and, to a degree, help educate people internationally. That's very important. As the oldest race on the planet, we have a responsibility to leave a legacy, and Margaret has been part of that. That's a very important accomplishment, and for the university to honour her today in this way is excellent. It's good that it's happening now. As you know, she's unwell, so It's probably happened at the right time. As much as the Aboriginal community honours the dead, we need to start honouring the living as well, so that we're ensuring that the marks we leave, our footprints in the sand, are noted and remembered. Waminjiki Yemen Kundi Bik Wurundjeri Balak. Welcome to the land of the Wurundjeri people. That is the land that you're on. Welcome to Melissa. I look forward to hearing Ian speak. I've known Ian Anderson for years. I don't call him Professor, Ian. And his mum, Sandra, who has been responsible for many years in this state for making sure that people have the right documentation to show their connection to country. We have a possum skin cloak here that was made by my young cousin, whose nephew will be performing for you when I finish speaking. So the things that Aboriginal people can contribute to society are quite broad, and because of this educational place's involvement in ensuring that that has started and will continue, I think is important for people to note. So thank you very much to all those involved. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'll now ask the group to Jindi Warabak, which means join and unite, to perform for you, and then we can all listen to speeches that are coming and go and have a bite to eat in the Margaret Williams-Weir Lounge, which will be very nice to experience.
Oh. Go!
So thank you to the Ginger Warwick Buck dancers. Pankana Ian Anderson, Palawa Troana, Pamarana, Patra Wallaway, Pamamarana, University of Melbourne, Katumana Mini Warandri Tiana, Kanamina Nenena Nika Lenena. So it's a protocol to acknowledge that country, and I want to do that on the behalf of my mother's people who come from a country called Trebekana and Larapana on an island called Trawana. Even though, as Auntie Margaret has just acknowledged, essentially we've been expatriates here in the country of Naarm for a long time now, and always made to feel very much at home. So thank you, Arnie, for your welcome. I want to also extend that to other Kulin peoples across this country, Naarm we call, across the other side of the Birrang Ma, to the Bunurong, to the Wadawurrung, across the Werribee River, to the Djadjawurrung and the Tangarung up in central Victoria, to acknowledge the elders, Narangeta, and to acknowledge other elders here. Particularly like to acknowledge Auntie Pat Anderson, who's come all this way. Pat, who's been like an auntie, and sometimes a mother, to me, who will tell you, if you give her enough time, about the times when I was 17 and 18 years old, when she used to ring up the university to make sure I was being fed. Actually, I think it was make sure I was going to class. Along with a number of senior Aboriginal women at the time, like Auntie Eleanor Harding, who really did actually look after us students when we were still quite a small number. But also, I want to just say a few words on the behalf of the Indigenous staff and students of this university, and to acknowledge our elder, Auntie Dr Margaret Weir-Williams. I'm actually quite deeply saddened that she couldn't be here. I know she wanted to be, and I'm really pleased that Melissa's able to join us on her behalf. Margaret is a woman of courage and conviction. In enrolling at the University of Melbourne, she did actually quite an ordinary thing, but was actually deeply extraordinary. And it really reflected her courage and her conviction. Today, the number of Indigenous students completing high school every year is growing, and it's numbered in the thousands. The year that Margaret graduated, there was one other Aboriginal person in New South Wales who matriculated. And I think probably just one or two other Aboriginal people in the whole country who had finished year 12. The face of Aboriginal education is profoundly changing, and it's happening right in front of us. And I'm so pleased that her life has actually lived to experience, and she's been a part of that. Over the last decade, the number of Indigenous students enrolled in Australian universities has grown by 52%, and now numbers in nearly 15,000. The success has been matched by growth in disciplines such as medicine. In 2011, the number of Aboriginal medical students as a proportion of first-year domestic students reached 2.7%, which was national parity. A long way from workforce parity, but it was remarkable given that just 20 years ago, there was one or two Aboriginal doctors in this country. So now we have over 200 Aboriginal doctors with nearly 300 in training. It's quite a remarkable change in the space of a generation. The number of PhD students. Margaret has a PhD, and when she graduated with the PhD, it was still a small handful. There are now over 200, and there are now over 300 in PhD training. A remarkable change in not a generation, in 15 years. Aboriginal students are now coming to the university, and we have approximately 260 students here at this university, but they're coming and their performance is stellar. So we have, for example, since 2003, 22 Aboriginal students who are coming in to the University of Melbourne as the elite category of Chancellor Scholars. These are students who have really succeeded and really doing well. And that is a sign of change that is extraordinary. But it would not have been possible if it was not for the courage from a young woman coming from Casino in New South Wales after a bad year at the University of Queensland, coming down here and challenging the status quo. And that's what I mean. Quite ordinary, but actually deeply extraordinary. And this was at the time when in Australia formally, most Aboriginal people didn't have the right to vote. At a time when actually most Aboriginal people didn't have the same civil rights as other Australians, when you actually couldn't get social welfare on the same basis of Aboriginal Australians. And it was actually 8 years before the freedom rides led by another extraordinary Aboriginal person, Charlie Perkins, exposed the deep, vindictive racism that Margaret grew up in northern New South Wales towns. So her courage is something for us all to remember and to honour and to thank her for. I want to just finish, and I'm actually going to say something else on behalf of someone else, but I just want to finish with, in Palawakani, some poetics was actually about calling country. Malethina nika, malethina mana, tapulchi larapana, tapulchi taricha, malethina nika, warranta pakana, warranta palawa, malethina nika. Thank you. Now I want to read something on behalf of Janet Deans-Ristic, who is an old friend of Margaret and really wanted to be here and wanted to say something on her behalf. So she was one of those other remarkable women at the time. Actually made it possible for her to come to university by organising a scholarship to support her to go to University Women's College, I think it was at the time, now University College. So she goes to say that how delighted she is about the award and would certainly have been here if she could. In 2014, Margaret was able to attend the Welcome to Country, which was organised by Murat Barak of the university. And Margaret spoke to the assembled audience of her lifelong commitment to education, saying it's never too late to start. She told me, Janet, that she had stayed in Canada for a number of good years. It was never good here at the time to be recognised as different, which she meant coloured. And Janet says that when she returned to Australia, she worked with a Canadian husband in Central Australia teaching, and then as an Aboriginal liaison officer for the Australian Teachers Federation, among numerous other things. And she travelled extensively throughout Australia in her work before settling in Canberra and now in her new country town in Grafton, New South Wales. Janet says she's a dynamic and articulated commitment for Indigenous rights and has continued working and learning until very recently. And I'm very pleased, as she is, that the award has been set up, and warmly congratulate Noel Pearson, as Lynn will say, tell us in a moment, is its first recipient. So I'd just also like to acknowledge Janet because I know they're very dear friends. So thank you.
Ian, thank you for that wonderful reflection and words. So we're now going to have two tributes. I'll present the first one and the Vice-Chancellor the second. In the first tribute, we're going to dedicate the naming of the graduate lounge that's on the ground floor, the Dr Margaret Williams-Weir Lounge. As you've heard, Margot Williams-Weir defied the odds to become the first Aboriginal person to enrol and subsequently 2 years later graduate from Australian University. She completed a Diploma in Physical Education at the University of Melbourne. This was not enough. Subsequently, she completed 3 more degrees, and as you've heard, she included a PhD from the University of New England. But given the era, which was before Aboriginal Australians were afforded equal civil rights, her achievements were inspiring indeed. She is a symbolic trailblazer and truly embodies the ambition and thirst for learning that we expect from all, and we want from all of our students and graduates at the University of Melbourne. Having had such a diverse career spanning 47 years, including research and teaching in Australia and overseas, it's only fitting that a valued student space be named in her honour. This building, and in particular the student lounge on the ground floor, is specifically designed for graduates. The lounge, as you will see, is a vibrant space. It's where students can find sanctuaries to gather their thoughts privately or gather collectively with their peers. The lounge has 3 areas: a private study area, an interactive area where groups can engage in small group learning, and a place where you can just simply chill out, socialise and appreciate the best coffee in the university. We believe that these opportunities and spaces align beautifully with Margot's passions, with her desire to interact with other learners and simply grow. She is a pioneer for education. I'd like to think that our students will be also. So at the conclusion of the formalities here, we're all going to go downstairs for the official unveiling. So I now invite you, Vice-Chancellor, to present the second tribute.
Thank you, Field. Thank you, Auntie Margaret, Provost Margaret, Melissa, and colleagues all. Thank you for being part of this exciting and long overdue recognition of Margaret Williams-Weir, an extraordinary woman, as you've heard. In 2014, at that Reconciliation Action Plan event, she was asked if she'd like to say a few words. She stood up and gave a fabulous impromptu speech to the current Indigenous students about why they should value education and why it should matter to them. It was an extraordinary speech, a deeply moving moment. So I share with Ian the great regret that she couldn't be here, that health doesn't allow her to be here today. We've been talking over the last year over the phone a bit, and you can hear that remarkable determination, but you can also hear how hard it is for her. So I really appreciate, Melissa, that you've come all of this way to be part of this ceremony. We create not just the lounge here, but the second part, as Field indicated, is that we're going to name a Vice-Chancellor's Fellowship in Margaret's honour. And it's the only time we've ever done this in the university. This is a 20-year program, just use the term Vice-Chancellor's Fellow, but from next year, or from this year, in fact, we're going to name one of those Vice-Chancellor's Fellowships in her honour and seek to ensure a steady flow over the years of Indigenous people who come and take up those fellowships and have a chance to contribute to the life of this institution. And I can't think of a more memorable way or apposite way to reflect Margaret's own intellectual history. And as was said by Ian in reading out that note a minute ago, Noel Pearson has agreed to be the first Margaret Williams-Weir Vice-Chancellor's Fellow, and it was a great delight to ask him, and I'm only sorry that he too is not here, but as Field said, because he missed the plane. He missed a charter flight from Cape York, which is really disappointing for him and for us, because it's great that we're honouring him in that way. But he, in turn, has spoken movingly about Margaret's contribution to Indigenous leadership in this country. And I know that the fellowship, because I got to discuss it with Margaret, means a lot to her and it means a lot to Noel. So it's a great way of bringing these things together. So today we celebrate a lounge, we celebrate a Vice-Chancellor's Fellow, we celebrate a great graduate, my God, who's done so much for Indigenous education in her roles as an educator, as a union official, and curiously as a member of the Canadian Navy, an unexpected detour in her life, but nonetheless found her a loving husband and something she enjoyed immensely. But there's something very odd about listening to her describe living in Anchorage and looking out over the Bering Strait in the middle of a conversation about Indigenous Australia. But I fear the explanation is as offered, that she felt she could be taken more seriously in her own right by being somewhere else than by being here, and that is an extraordinarily sad reflection. So it's great that she returned and that we get to honour her in this way. Thank you for the chance to be part of this.
Auntie would be so proud of today's events, and she deeply would have loved to have been here. So before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the elders, families of the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of this land we meet on today. And Auntie Margaret Gardner, thank you so much for welcoming us here. And I promise to tread carefully in our footprints to respect this beautiful country. And the fabulous warrior dancers, how good were they? Fantastic. So to Vice-Chancellor Davis, Professor Anderson, Professor Langton, Dean Rickards, and obviously congratulations to Noel Pearson. And pathmakers gathered here today, I thank you on behalf of Dr Williams-Weir for this great honour, and I'm proud that she is my Auntie Margot. I'd also like to acknowledge Auntie Pat Anderson, Auntie Robin McLeod, and to me, Auntie Jenny Neal Deans, who's representing the Deans family. It is with this spirit of the land in which we stand that Auntie Margot set her sights in acceptance to University Women's College. She was the baby of the Williams clan, one of 10 children. From a young age, Auntie Margot felt a calling, and that calling was to become a teacher. And life at the time, as mentioned before, where you weren't even considered a citizen in your own country, was pretty tough. And that calling was to be a teacher. And I know some of you present in this room today will feel those words pointedly. That was life for them too, and I honour you. Nana Williams at the time said Aboriginal people aren't allowed into university. She referred to as black people weren't allowed into university. So we internalised that quiet bigotry of lowered expectations. But Auntie Margot, the strong, independent woman that she is, decided to trust her calling. Nana Williams set a very powerful example by supporting all her children. She had a strong work ethic. They were always key messages, and so was education. And what a role model. And with that, Auntie Margot persisted, and in spite of the expectations of society at the time, she defied odds and prevailed. Auntie Margot's determination took her from one room, a multi-age primary school classroom, to become the first Aboriginal student to enrol in grade 6 at Casino Primary School with 500 other students. Auntie Margot was set to the back of the room at that time, and I use her words, like a leper she was treated. From 53rd in the class of 55, at the start of the year, she came 17th in the final exam. So that was a sign she was on her way. Auntie Margot's high school career saw her smash new barriers. Her natural sporting talents led her to become a prefect and captain of the school's field hockey team. Little did Auntie Margot know that sport, in fact, was to lead her to her destiny. Her goal was still to go to university, become a teacher. Nana Williams at the time said, I don't know how you're going to do this, to Auntie Margot, because we had no money. But Auntie Margot, in her unwavering feeling about her calling, persisted through the years, and so it was. In 1956, Auntie Margot, along with Geoffrey Penny in Western Australia, became the first Aboriginal Australians to matriculate from high school, and in 1957 in an Australian university. So with an Aboriginal scholarship, she enrolled in the Bachelor of Arts at the University of Queensland. She wasn't sold on that degree. She was doing in the environment she described, it was like a big factory. Wasn't that personal? She passed 2 courses, failed 2 courses, and she was deeply disappointed in herself. But Auntie Margot figured out the reasons why. Her secondary schooling, while adequate, had never prepared her to be academically rigorous, employ sophisticated analytical methods, and think critically. She had to find a better environment. But how? At that time, it was enough to just keep on keeping on. While in her first year at UQ, Auntie Gloria, Auntie Elva, and Auntie Betty started an all-women's hockey team, all Aboriginal women's hockey team, called the Belvederes. The Belvederes played in Brisbane in a town competition. Then UQ joined that Brisbane competition, and Auntie Margot asked the girls, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to still play for you, or do you want me to join the UQ University team? Being the first Aboriginal person to go to the university was the underlying reason for that question. Did she make her presence felt in other areas of the university rather than just her academic studies? The Belvederes did not hesitate. United, they told her, you must play for UQ. The Belvederes wanted it known that we were part of society, that we excelled. Her achievement was the achievement of every Aboriginal girl who aspired to use her agile mind and questioning heart. It also was an important lesson in maintaining cultural protocols, whilst still successfully engaging in a society that was not advanced enough in 1957 to call itself post-colonial. So I'll leave the question of whether we're living in a post-colonial society, even now to the avid debaters in the room, to continue over refreshments. The lesson. Leadership is not a domain of a few, Decisions are made by communities about communities. Aunty Margot had not only crossed Boundary Street, she was a living, breathing testament to the thriving in what was once an exclusion zone. Yet she crossed Boundary Street daily, going home every day, studying at 11 p.m. Till 11 p.m. at night. Nana Williams would insist on turning that light out. She did comply. She'd wake up again at 1 a.m. and study till dawn. In the August holidays, Aunty Margot and the UQ women's hockey team went on tour to Adelaide, stopping off at other universities in Sydney and Melbourne. As Aunty Margot tells it, when she got to the University of Melbourne, she thought, this is the right place for me. She could feel the energy and the wisdom. It all made sense. Her journey through primary and high school, the barriers she'd faced and overcome, even down to having started a degree that she wasn't keen on. I mean, how many of us commence a course of study only to change our major when we found out what we really wanted to do or made our hearts sing? Aunty Margot had a friend, Janet Deans, Auntie Janet to me, who was already enrolled at University College. Between Janet and Aunty Janet, Janet's supportive parents and the University of Melbourne, they managed to engineer a free place for Aunty Margot to study alongside 240 other girls at the University Women's College. She applied and got into the Diploma of Physical Education, a perfect match for Aunty Margot's skills and talents. And at the University of Melbourne, the course comprising the Physical Education Diploma was small. The supportive staff gave her the guidance she needed. She made headways on the gaps that undermined her academic progress at the University of Queensland, and she did very well. Aunty Margot was in the Society of Daughters of the Scions of Society, the daughter of Melbourne Lord Mayor, the niece of Prime Minister Menzies. At the end of the 50s, Aunty Margot said, for Aboriginal people to get ahead, you usually had to have good white people come along and give you a helping hand. The Deans family was that for Aunty Margot. Invited back to the Deans family home some weekends, she soaked it up and learned how to move in that society. My thanks go out to Janet Deans and her family for the important demonstration of solidarity and support. Character-making experiences don't happen in a vacuum. Yet it was also a lonely experience sometimes, very hard, as there wasn't many Aboriginal faces, in fact, none at that time, which brings me to today. When today's Aboriginal students look around Australian universities, what do they see? Well, we do see progress, as outlined before by Professor Anderson, but we're still behind on major higher education indicators on a per capita basis. But universities like Melbourne and other universities around Australia, like Western Sydney University, where I work as the Director of the Office of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Employment Engagement, are making headway through a series of innovative measures, be it Elders on Campus, First Peoples Business Generator, traineeships, cadetships and early career academics. These developmental approaches, or innovative approaches, are building bridges to good futures. But we must work harder to build communities. It's not enough if individual Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people get ahead. We must bring their communities with them, and they must be supported as ambassadors with the benefits of higher education back into their communities. But back to Aunty Margot. Let's face it, Western institutions back then were, even if they were not overtly antagonistic towards Aboriginal people, were structurally committed to breeding out the black. It remained a difficult question, and one is still vexed with younger Aboriginal people, lost ones who've been denied access to their culture due to practices of removing children over decades, whose parents passed as white, who, for the sake of making their children's lives easier, did not tell them about their Aboriginal heritage until they were older, or not at all. Let us not forget that many went to their graves with that secret, and their children and grandchildren were robbed of that cultural heritage, knowledge, lands and much more. It is this stigma and pain that these practices, that universities can help eradicate by helping overcome the lone achiever, narrative Aboriginal success stories such as Aunty Margot. We must champion the achievements and progress towards equality of entire communities, not just individuals, but celebrating how those communities engage with and transform university spaces, knowledge caches, staff cohorts, and student diversity. So on behalf of my auntie, Dr Margaret Williams-Weir, and the Borden Gordon family, I offer our thanks and gratitude to the University of Melbourne. Thank you for choosing to honour Dr Williams-Weir by naming the lounge and creating a fellowship in her name. Auntie Margot accepts this as a credit not just to herself, but more broadly to the communities she's moved through, has been part of, and that have helped her to make the person she is. So thank you.
Melissa, thank you for your absolutely inspiring reflections. You've actually almost single-handedly made this such a special occasion this afternoon. We thank you for that. And it's clear by the crowd gathered here just how significant Dr Williams-Weir's contributions have been, both to the university and to the broader community. So I'm delighted that we can continue with this legacy in the two ways and hope that we can inspire the same sort of passion in students in years to come.